Hey y'all, today is a servitor show and tell. I will be talking to y'all about the mistakes I've made, what I would do differently, how I work with my servitors, the different iterations I've gone through, the grimoire page of one of them, and how I update them. So, if you're interested, here we go. Okay, so these are the 4 mistakes that I made when I started my servitor work. I'm going to take these off. So, mistake number 1. I started with servitors. I started making them. I started creating them. I started working with them. However you want to look at it, way too soon. Because when I started with my servitor work, even though I had been practicing chaos magic for several years, I was doing it from a very naive, magic is a shortcut kind of perspective. I was not genuinely committed to it as much as I am now. I still can't do a lot of research in terms of reading, research, and things like that, but I have a lot of personal experience now with my altogether now about a decade than I did when I originally started it. And my next mistake was I kept comparing my relationships with my servitors to others' experiences or what I perceived their experiences with their servitors to be. So I remember talking about my experience with my servitors and feeling like they weren't working in a Discord I was in, and I was talking about X, Y, and Z situation, right? And I think it was Ivy's server actually, because I think Ivy specifically asked me, like, why do you feel like you need to use them to begin with? And I was like, I was just so baffled by that because I never answered that question for myself. So when it comes to this mistake of comparing your practice or your servitors or whatever you're doing to other people, that is like, even though that was the number 2 mistake I wrote down, I would say that was the number 1 mistake that a lot of people make, is not knowing why they're doing what they're doing and not comparing their personal practice to other people's practice. This is editing Felicity. So when it comes to knowing why you wanted to create servitors, for me, I never really put it into words. I just saw it as a creative endeavor. And what I would suggest, now that I know better, a good reason to work with servitors is to paradigm shift, to question your dogma, to be more active in your practice. Even when you can't physically be there, you can have these little entities doing work for you. It can help you work on your inner world, let's say your inner temple or your meditation practice. There are a lot of good reasons to create servitors, but I would just always suggest that you have one of these reasons before you jump in, rather than I just want to do something creative. Mistake number 3, I was never specific enough with the tasks, jobs, and purposes of the servitors I was creating. Now, what does that mean? Now, the best way to create servitors involves essentially creating a name for them, a purpose, giving them a house, giving them a sigil, creating a fail-safe, and essentially writing a description for what their job is, how they're to accomplish it, what offerings you'll be giving them, etc. And I'll show you an example of that later when we talk about the grimoire. But what I was doing was I was just giving them like general adjectives. Like, you're going to help me be creative. You're going to help me sleep at night. You're going to blah blah blah. But I didn't explain specifically what they were going to be doing and how they were going to be doing it. And you can leave a kind of general thing in their description when you first create them, and then over time, as you create the relationship, you get more specific with things, and that's fine. But if you continue with this very general, non-specific point of view, and in my experience, any type of magic that you're doing, it's very difficult to get the execution of what you want. Mistake number 4 is I didn't create any fatal flaws for my original 10 servitors. Yes, that is right. I created 9 other servitors along with my first servitor within the course of 3 to 6 months. I gave them general purposes. I gave them names. I gave them houses. I activated them, only to shortly after that lose all of the houses that I had created for these servitors. And now I just have all these depressed, bored little entities causing mischief for me 24/7 because they don't have a job to do. And I put all of this energy and effort into them without any fail safes, without any proper maintenance, jack. So, yeah, don't do that. So what would I do differently? How would I do it now? So, how many active servitors do I have, and how do I work with them? I have 2 active servitors, and what do I mean by that? I mean, I have 2 of them that I work with on a regular basis. I have a third one that has one very specific purpose. I give him energy here and there when he needs it. I give him offerings, but I don't have too much of a relationship with him. He is very much the typical thought form servitor. But when it comes to servitors I've grown with, I have relationships with, I have 2 main active ones. So how do I work with these servitors? I have a system. So I have this inner world with fantasy and lore and all of this other stuff. And what I do is I have this character or this insert with a name. And what I will do is I will play like fantasy games, or I'll write stories with this character that represents myself. And I'll have them interact with my servitors to do certain tasks, to do certain things, to accomplish certain goals. And that's how I work with them. I just write stories, whether it's in my head, whether I'm playing an RPG, whether I'm drawing a little doodle and then later I get rid of it. It really just depends. But a lot of my servitor work is done in the mental plane or with video gaming. So, let me introduce you to the first servitor I ever created. His name is Giles. After working with him for several years now, I've come to the conclusion that he probably falls under more of the umbrella of a familiar now. When I originally created him, I created him with the idea that I was eventually going to turn him into an egregore. And with that in mind, I went with the idea that some people have for servitors. There's one camp that says they're only thought forms. There's another that says you are essentially creating a spiritual ad in the paper for a job, and then a certain entity will take that job application. Now, with that one in mind, I wrote a contract. I don't have this physical contract anymore. It's more of a mental thing. But all of the things that this servitor was supposed to do, I later allocated to another servitor. And so right now, when I work with him, I do something completely different with him than he was originally created for. And my newest servitor, now that he has the jobs that he has, doesn't do what I originally created him for either. So let me introduce you to Giles. These are his original ones, and then I'll get to his newest ones. So originally, I did a crochet pattern that I found online. I drew a couple of variations of what I wanted him to look like. And eventually, he just changed with me, you know. I originally based him off of my deceased pet rabbit and my obsession with the ideology of biblically accurate angels. And then from there, I changed so much for several different reasons. So eventually, I tried to create a paper doll of him because his original house that I made for him, like I said, it was a crochet doll. And I eventually had to take it apart. And when I took it apart, there was a long time where he was just living in my head. And I didn't really have a house for him. And I wanted a house for him, so I tried to make different things. I made like 7 different crochet dolls. And I took every single one of them apart because I could not get them right. The newest crochet doll I tried to make, I made a significant portion of it, and then I took it apart, and now all that's left is the head because I could not get it right. This is his head. I was very, very proud of the effort that went into this. But because I only had these colors and I only had these materials and I only have my personal experience with crochet, I don't have money for patterns. The one that I bought years ago when I had a job. And so this is all I got. I learned from watching and I just winged it. It doesn't look terrible. I do still really love it, but I couldn't get the head and the neck right. I couldn't get the body right. So I just kept this. And I mean, look at him. He's got the little goat tufts and his little horns, and he has goat ears and rabbit ears. I love him. He also has goat eyes and predator eyes. So this is a painting I made of him. He has a title. I just don't feel like sharing that. I don't feel comfortable doing that. And I don't really, I mean, I do have a sigil, but I don't feel comfortable sharing that either. I haven't really figured out how to properly activate him because I haven't figured out what new job to give him. Like, I hang out with him in my head all the time. I just, I don't know what to give him to do. Because I've come to the conclusion that he is a psychopomp. He's a very chaotic, goofy, sarcastic, loving guide, you know? He will cause you chaos to help you grow, and he'll protect you when it's absolutely necessary, but he wants you to have the strength yourself. But he loves the fuck around and find out game. He's very the easiest way to explain him is if there was one archetype for these two personalities. So the personality of Uncle Iroh, actually no. It's just like Uncle Iroh's personality with like a tad bit of Black Butler. Because Uncle Iroh is capable of being incredibly intelligent and wise and determined, but he uses his outward appearance and what you automatically assume he is to weaponize incompetence. He uses weaponized incompetence in terms of his age, his appearance, and things like that to trick his enemies and to trick people into not taking him seriously. And then he comes out with this wise shit. Like, instead of goofy and wise, he's goofy, wise, and sarcastic, you know? Okay, my most recent servitor is this little guy. This is a stuffed animal I've had since I was a child. The stuffed animal's name is Daniel Tiger from Mr. Rogers. And then the servitor's name is Stripes. I also have a sigil representing my passed on cat in here. I have her shrine over there. And I have a deal worked out with her and the servitor. So I give energy to her. She helps give energy to the servitor. So how do I give energy to the servitor? How do I work with this servitor? So I work with this servitor in a similar way to the way that I work with Giles. Like I said, when I work with my servitors, I might, play a video game, and I might do a little meditation. I might write a story, things like that. But what I do specifically with Stripes is a little bit different. So when I am giving him energy, I write his sigil on my right hand. And when I'm receiving energy, I write his sigil on my left hand. I have 2 crystals in him. One is an amethyst and one is a clear quartz. I also have the different sigils I've created for his different purposes, housed in his little in the house. And when sometimes I do things for the servitor, sometimes I do things for my passed on cat, but either way they kind of work in tandem with each other. So I might pet the stuffed animal if I feel that her spirit is visiting me, right? Or I might pet the stuffed animal to just give the house itself energy. You know what I mean? So with the crystals, what I will do is I will take energy that I have stored up from the day or that is keeping me up, and I will put it into these crystals. I will draw the sigil on my right hand. I will imagine the energy leaving my body and going into these 2 crystals. And I will imagine Stripes transmuting that energy and manipulating that energy and essentially like storing it up more specifically. So not necessarily transmuting it in the now, but storing it to transmute it later. And then later what I will do to clear the crystals and transmute that energy before I receive it on my left hand is I will play healing music, healing sounds, healing frequencies around the crystals and the sigils. And then I will also imagine that they are kyber crystals in a lightsaber and that they have been bled and that I am healing them. If you are a Star Wars fan, you probably understand what that means. If you're not, let me explain. In Star Wars, what makes the lightsabers function, and I am only talking about the kyber crystals here, so don't jump on my ass. They have these things called kyber crystals in the lightsabers that essentially make them function. They're like an energy source. They're the thing that makes the oh my god, I forget the word. The lightsaber come out, right? And if you pour your hatred into them, you bleed them, and that's what turns them red. And when you heal them, it turns white. So yeah, that's what I imagine. And that is my process of transmuting the energy. And then I will receive the energy here. I'll draw his symbol on my hand, on my left hand. And then when I'm receiving the energy, I see these like black and white spirals just like swirling around my body. And then I take that energy and I'll go create something. So for my grimoire, a lot of the time, I will use the app Notion. And when it comes to things like actually creating things, I'll typically use a notebook, and then I will in-source the pictures into the Notion. Here I'm just going through the different sections of this particular grimoire page in terms of the creation of Stripes. So here I'm just outlining the different purposes that he has. So he's a battery. I can put information or energy into him. He's a comfort to me. He can help me, calm down and focus and help me sleep, right? And so here was me just like highlighting and explaining the different purposes that I gave him, kind of just very simply. And I wouldn't say generally. I think that these are pretty specific. They've gotten more specific over time, but this was more of the outline that I started with. So here, the fifth task that I gave him is not only does he like help me create, but he also helps me learn. One thing I like about Notion are these little thing called call outs. Now, if you see there's a little speakerphone, and then on another one is a star. The star is the most recent edit. But what I do with these call outs is I will make little edits to the grimoire, and I will date them with updated information. So if I change things, or if I didn't like something, if I have a little note about how something's working, I'll put it there. I have the activation code, the rules, the offerings that I've used, and then the call outs are for how those things have been working, if I find them helpful, etc., etc. So here I'm going into one of the sections of the grimoire page. This has to do with the pictures of his sigil and how I made it. I make each of my sigils a little bit differently depending on what I need to use them for. This is the picture of his altar, spell bags, extra sigils I've made, notes about the sigils, how they were working, what I did with them. And it's just really helpful because with Notion you can put pages within pages. So in my sustenance and offering section, there's actually a list of ideas that I wrote in my original outline that I just decided I didn't need, don't have to use, etc. Now, one of the most important parts of creating a servitor, in my opinion, is the fatal flaw. I have it outlined here. You can just take a look at what I wrote. Feel free. The fatal flaw I created was more of a ritual rather than a spell. Alright guys, that's all for today. This was Felicity Chaos of Felicity 90 Degrees, also known as Chaotic Opossum. If you like my channel, please subscribe and give it a like. I'd love if you comment. Just don't be a bitch about it. Anyway, you have a wonderful day, and thank you for listening.